doesn't stretch. We didn't really, we covered in discussion, but I want to nail it, really like get it specific. And then also talk about integration of personal sequencing. So how you integrate a set within your own style. And I have both. Most teachers teach sets and then personal sequences. So sometimes you'll teach like my exact flow set, or let's say the Hot 26 or HPF. And then you have this sort of freestyle as a teacher grows. Usually after about a year, you'll start wanting to do your own stuff, and maybe you'll want to do it sooner. Some places you can do it. You can go and it's a free-for-all right away. A lot of places want to hire you to teach a sequence. So like a flow set. So you could send them, hey, this is the set that I teach. One of the things that it's good for is, let's say you're going for a job and they're like, well, what do you teach? You can go like, well, actually you could go to Wrist Power Yoga, that set right there, that's what I'm going to teach. And you could send them a link and then they know. So it's actually a good tool. Like when I knew that Lisa taught the Hot Power Fusion Hot 26 sequence, I already knew what it was. So one question, when I get something like when someone writes me and, they'll say like, hi, my name is Sally Rainbow and I teach yoga and I'd love to teach. And I'm like, do you have any video? No. Do you have any, like, where were you certified at, Shakti Rama Studio in Alaska? At the North Pole, whatever it is, wherever it is. And I'm like, cool. But I have no idea. We were talking about perceived value. So I have no idea what she's going to do in my studio. I have a name, and I have like a studio that I don't know. So I don't know. So I'm less, it's not that I'm against. Sometimes teachers just have talent, and they can just teach, and it's great. But as a business owner, I want to know kind of what I'm getting. So that does help. So that's why you learn sets. But I also want you, because you might end up finding your voice in like dance flow or something, like where you create this whole dance thing where it's just, inhale, upward dog. 2, 3, 4. Exhale, downward dog. 2, 3, 4. Whatever. And that's your thing. And so that's where personal sequence comes in, personal style.
Kind of Omar,
yeah, some people do that.
Like a hip-hop thing.
A lot of people that I've trained have gone off to do their own.
Mm-hmm. We trained with Stephen, who does hip-hop.
He does more like that's one of his styles. He has he does a bunch of things actually. But like he's branched off into doing sequencing, so his own sequencing, right? So so I want to talk about how to integrate. So there's something that I heard from years ago, and I think it was from a teacher named Monty, but I'm not sure. Imitate, integrate, create. Those 3 words. So first you imitate a style, right? Which means you teach whatever, let's say the flow set or power yoga. Set 1 or whatever it is, and then you integrate sequencing. Today's a perfect example. I taught the set. Do you guys remember all those sequences? But I integrated a bunch, like a katakali, we did the legs out, we did some pranayama, we did some like more side plank push-ups, right? So that's integrating within the sequence, okay? So I sort of integrated. And then create. Creating is when you create a set, so your own set. Apply the 3 movements, the 3 planes of movement. Remember the 3 planes of movement? Or did we not cover that? Yeah. So the 3 planes of movement are like twists through the center of the body, through the plane, through the coronal plane, the front and back, where the body's split, transverse, right, and transverse, forward fold, yes. Lisa nailed it. So those are the 3. I get confused with transverse for some reason, because to me transverse means upper right to lower left in my mind, because it's cross verse, it's cross the song, but in fact it just means It's transverse is like this. Like if you're sitting and you have a hula hoop, and you bend through the hula hoop, that's transverse.
And what's the
Yeah.
difference? Coronal?
Coronal is if you split right this way. So like this, back and front. So posterior, superior.
That was the second one, the coronal?
Transverse, coronal, yeah. Coronal is like back to front. Although I think that's in a different section because I didn't cover it yet. It's in the book though. It's in our books. I promise you it's in your books. You guys haven't been reading your books. Something I want to talk about. There's a lot of books. I know. But books are good for your health. Okay. So I know it's a lot of books.
I keep bouncing around.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's fine. I mean,
If you said read these pages this week, I mean.
all right, well, that's what I'm going to do today, too, is I want to talk about the book. So there's a few books. There's a few pages in this particular book.
Great.
Number 1, the Rig Veda, is page 1. That's funny, there's one. Page 1. The Rig Veda, in the Vedas. The next one is the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which he talks about history. Page 16. This is in one of my favorite books, which is backwards right now, but it's Teaching Yoga by Mark Stevens. It's really good. Pages.
What about these pages now? I'm confused.
So these are the books. I'm streaming it too. It'll be online as well. These are the ones I'm saying to focus on.
The clue, it'll be.
So who said that? Someone said if you tell me which pages to read, I'll read those.
Yeah.
And okay, so that's what these are. So in this book, all the pages are but if some of you might like to skim through some sections, then these sections are great. 59, subtle energy. 59 in the chakras, right? It's 58 as the chakras, page 58. So that's that. Okay. I mean, I did spend quite a bit of time. The body structure starts with the body structure and movement. So it talks about the planes of movement a little bit. Teaching.
You have to know all of this stuff, like.
These are the sections I'm telling you to read.
Yeah, but I mean, it's more like I read through this and I.
The 3 planes of movement you must memorize.
Oh.
I think so. Any questions? Yeah? No?
For the yoga secrets that you want us to write, so do you want us to be based on set or learning, or just kind of do
Whatever you want. The farther that it gets away from the structure, it's probably going to be harder. Probably be harder for you to, if you try to go totally, like think of it as a sculptor. If you're learning from, or let's say from a painter, and this person paints with oil paints on canvas, and you suddenly decide that you want to sketch drawing in air with the computer. You know what I mean? So the farther you get away from what you're already being taught, probably the harder it's going to be, all those learning curves.
Do you want us to write it like a verbatim script type of thing?
No,
or
you could just stick figure it
out?
out, outline it, make it easy on yourself.
Can we also write it, or we have to?
What?
Can we also write it? Or?
You could write it out. It's totally for you. Really, this is your homework. I mean, this is not,
We're not doing it for.
it's not a right or wrong. It's an exercise in creativity. So it's not like you're going to come and teach it.
Oh,
It's just
that's
for you to look at it and share amongst each other. That's what I'd really like to do with this particular one. I will look at them a little bit as well. Like I look at your homework, but I don't always comment. It depends. If I feel like somebody's point of view is really far away from what I was trying to convey, I might start a dialogue about that, but not always. It depends. Usually I will. If it's really like if somebody comes in and they're really into paleo diet, and I really feel like that I don't agree or something, I may start a dialogue, but I'm not going to say you're wrong and I'm right because I'm the teacher. It just depends.
Well,
Depends on what it is.
Are we supposed to send our homework in every?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, really?
Shit, I'm sorry.
Send it in. Yeah, email it to me.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Email it. Yeah, you sent it. I got yours. I got your essay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just send the essay.
Yeah, the essay. Some of it you can't. For instance, like
The stick figure?
you could send me the playlist. I saw your stick figures because everyone brought them in,
Yeah.
so that counts. But email me like something like this. I would say draw it out and email it to me just so that I can look at, just so I could see it. I want to see if there isn't really right or wrong, but there are a few things you could do that would be not so good for the human body.
Sure.
For instance, don't start off with a deep back.
Yeah. Well,
And what about like asanas that are in the book? Should we actually kind of know all of them and like also knowing some?
You're not, it's impossible. No. I'd like for you to know the Sanskrit and English names of the sequence. And I have the document. If you don't have it or you didn't get it, then send me a request for it. I'll resend it. I sent it in, I think I sent it in the first email. The Sanskrit and English. I have that. Yeah, but check later. Just write down Sanskrit to English, ? Then you'll have it. A lot of specific curriculum here today. How many of you did the playlist thing? Lisa's like, I do
I
playlists.
missed that, so I have some questions about it.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay, because you make playlists.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so you all did it, but everyone did playlists?
Yes.
Okay. Did you do a playlist? No? You must do your playlist. So now you have to send me a snapshot of a playlist, 1 hour.
Well, I'm using her.
No, that's not the exercise. See, that's why I want you guys to do your homework. The exercise is, what if Stephanie, I know, we played your playlist on Tuesday, by the way. We
I
did.
saw it on Facebook,
Mhm.
but I couldn't get onto SoundCloud.
You have to have an account.
That's
But it's free. It's free. The account's free.
okay. I did see that though.
Yeah,
Is it good?
it's really good.
I bet it's
But what was your question, though? So what was your question?
Well, just get specific with the beats per minute. Like for example, do you do like 60 for your opening sequence when it's just starting, and then at some point in the middle when you're at your peak, are you doing 100? And
Just
then
write this down. I think it'll.
I'm just curious.
Okay, so I usually do like 0 to 20 in the opening,
Okay.
and then that's like 10 minutes or 5 minutes, depends on how much I want to talk
Okay.
in the beginning, and then somewhere around anywhere from like 60 to 100, I'd say, till abs, because I do. You know, we were talking about rhythmic and tonal flavor, right? Which means there's beats, so there's like, right, that kind of fast, housey rhythm. And then there's like, that eventually starts to disappear. If it goes on for too long, that straight sound, it just eventually, like your mind, there's no tonal, there's no rhythmic contrast. So like to change it a little bit, to kind of vary it. And then in abs, I'm usually about 100 to 120 or up, depends. And then after abs, it's down to like 0, it depends. Could be drone.
For the stretches and then going into shavasana,
Yeah, that's kind of the rough outline. I don't stick very strictly to it.
but more or less.
But if you looked at 90% of my playlists, they go somewhere in that rhythm. And also tonal color. Tonal color would be classified as a melody. For instance, a melody, you know, whatever it is. I don't want to sing right now. It's my la 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 la. That's a melody because it has tonal color, right? It has variance in tonal color. And then there's Om. There's not a lot of tonal color. There's one. There's no variation in tonal color. So different music has different variations in tonal color. So I do like to also think along those lines. I don't know if you use that term or not, but that's the term we use when we're making music. A song that has very little variance in tonal color is oftentimes like EDM. EDM oftentimes stays pretty close to its original format as other music has more tonal color than EDM. Not to say EDM has no tonal color. It does, but it has less than, let's say,
Jazz.
Epitaph by Branford Marsalis or something, yeah. It's a lot of tonal color from the beginning to the end, as well as rhythmic color, right? Rhythmic meaning the speed in which the tempo of the beats. The tempo of the downbeats is the rhythmic color of the song, the variation of that. Okay. Universal principles of alignment. So this is now the main thing to know about universal principle alignment versus principles of alignment versus what would be the other principle of alignment, the way someone teaches alignment. What's the other? I'm pointing at Lisa. What's another? Like, where did you learn? So, like, all the alignment in the Hot 26, where does most of that come from?
Are you talking about lineage?
Yeah, well, so there's two alignment sources, mainly. One is looking at the structure, looking at Guthrie, the bones, right? Looking at the structure and knowing that this doesn't move right. The other source of alignment is lineage. This lineage teaches it this way, which many people will follow blindly. Doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Just because it's old, it doesn't mean it's right. Right?
You're talking about like the Hot 26.
Just because it's old.
Is no longer viable. Right?
Locking the knee. That's another one.
That used to be a big thing.
It's in this. It's in the other one. Yes, locking the knee. They talk about it. No, they talk about not. And it's in Hellbent by Benjamin Lohr, another great book. Talks about locking the knee. It's universally accepted.
Still?
No. I'm saying it's not accepted. It's universally accepted amongst the anatomists and kinesiologists of the world that forcing a locked joint is not good for a hinged joint. Why? Because it causes it can cause destabilization of the structure. That's why. It can loosen up the joint. Because you're stretching on it.
10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, like 10 years ago. 10 years, I would say 10 to 12. I have been doing it not locking the knee for a long time, maybe 15 years. I didn't even look for research for it. Because stretching a ligament is not often good for the structure of the joint. The only time you stretch a ligament is for specific performance. Doesn't mean it's good for you, but for instance, like a professional ballerina or a contortionist. Does it make sense? It's just because it's specific performance. They know it's not good, but hey, it's how I make my living.
It looks good.
It looks good, right? Different sources. So what's the difference between a ligament and a tendon? Yes. So a ligament holds bone to bone. Think of the ligaments are almost like, you ever see buildings that have steel cables? They're like a lot in parking structures, you'll see steel cables crossing each other and they're tightened up, they're very taut, right? So that cable has some flexibility, but it provides structural support to the building. They're there for a reason. They're not steel sagging cables or a bridge, a giant bridge. They got the cables, the cable bridge. I forget what there's a name for that. But suspension bridge. Those cables are pretty tight. Matter of fact, they're tightened to a specific specification. If they're loose, overly loose, they almost don't need to be there. Because once the structure loses its structural integrity, it now it has a greater propensity to fail, to have catastrophic failure. Same thing is true of the ligaments in your knee, the ligaments in your wrist, the ligaments that keep your body kind of structurally sound. That's why you don't want to stretch the knee sideways. Matter of fact, you don't want to really stretch the knee. The knee needs to be intact. It's built that way. You want to stretch the muscles, the belly and fascia of the muscle. Maybe you should write that down too. The belly and the fascia of the muscle. So the muscle tissue and the sheath, which often also comes down and terminates into a tendon. But you don't stretch the tendon, you stretch the muscle. Oddly enough. Rare cases where you wouldn't. Very rare cases where you would stretch the tendon. For instance, pictures we know, they really some of the ligaments and tendons of the shoulder to get that performance. Many of whom end up suffering with shoulder conditions as a result of pitching.
What did you say about the tendons? What did you say about the tendons?
So stretch muscle and fascia, not ligaments and tendons. Not much. Again, what happens when you overstretch a tendon? What happens to it?
Can it break?
It can break. It could. That's how one of the ways they break. Because they're really not that flexible. If you stretch a tendon, it takes longer for it to heal. And it oftentimes can get tendinitis. It can.
The ligaments don't come back.
If you overstretch them, they're more like plastic.
How do we feel if we overstretch it?
Take your hand like this. Sideways. Feel that in your joints? It just feels, it's hot, pain.
Like more like your body, like
It's like a hot pain usually where the connected. Then you need to know the body. The other thing about understanding anatomy, that's why I want you guys to read the books, is because when I'm practicing yoga, I know when I'm stretching my muscle, because I know that this is all muscle in this region here on my femur. 5 inches below the hip, 4 inches above the knee. That's all muscle in here predominantly. So if I'm feeling pain here, even in the iliotibial band, if it's up here, it's still pretty safe. Pretty safe. But if I feel it here, right at the hamstring attachment to the... Okay, so it's right there, at the bottom of your butt, the bone. So that's the bottom of the ilium. That's where the hamstrings are coming in. There's these giant tendons. If you feel it there, it's not good. Then you need to do less deep stretching, holding in Warrior 2. Okay, that's usually what the cause of that is. And the only way to know that is to know anatomy. To know anatomy. But if someone says, when I stretch, man, I really feel it. I'm trying to get this the wrong impression. I really feel it right here. And here. If you feel it there, it's okay because that's muscle generally. But if you start to feel it in here, right behind the knee, or you feel it here, right at the attachment point of the ilium, then you know it's time to ease back. Okay? That's how you know. Because you know where the attachment point of the muscle to bone is. You know it's at a ligament. The ligament is. The ligament was, you wouldn't know how to differentiate between the good pain and the bad pain. They do feel differently, too. The muscle aches. It's more of an achy pain, a warm, slow ember pain. And the tendon pain is like a hot iron. Almost think of like an iron, like it's gonna overload and burn. That's what it feels like. That's the best way for me to describe it. I sometimes get that here, like when I do Konasana. So I'm stretching like this. And if somebody pushes on my back, I start to feel a hot pain right there. Again, at the joint. That's where you know. Okay? Like that takes the knowledge of the human. So when a student asks you, you can go, that's not good pain because it's right at you're pointing right at the whatever, the hamstring attachment point to the hip or wherever it is. Okay, it's right at the bone. So if you're feeling that Warrior 2, because your Warrior 2s are very deep, maybe you need to come less deep. Okay, yeah. Maybe there's the beginning. There's also something.
Also like when I it's like always like jumping
Mm-hmm.
somebody else.
Punching. It's not sounding good, whatever it is. So if it isn't, if it's going like, it's like making that, like the hip is not to make too much chomping sound. Could be. Probably. In ballet, they tend to overstretch. They tend to. Ballerinas tend to be overly flexible. It's called ligamentous laxity. There's that word, they call it ligamentous laxity. So there's actually a term for being flexible in the wrong way, or in the wrong areas. Muscles, fine. Ligaments and tendons, not so much. There's also something called tendinosis, which is like the gradual weakening of a tendon over time. That's a little different. That's where the actual tendon gets stretched, doesn't get enough resting time in between. So when you train too much, yogis that are constantly saying like, my SI joint is so sore, like it's so sore, every day it's sore. Sometimes people do too much yoga and they don't realize that they need to actually do like 2 days on, 1 day off, right? Sometimes. You ask them, what are you doing? What's going on? Well, I only do yoga like 4 days a week. I'm like, okay, what else do you do? Oh, well, I'm actually training for the the Boston Marathon. I'm like, how many times is that? Well, it's every day. You mean not even 1 day off, not even Sunday? No. That's a little excessive. Because those people train for hours and hours. So that's where you start to run into trouble. All right, well, we covered ligament and tendon. That's later on. That's okay. Fascia, what's fascia?
Fascia is
Lisa, you can chime in too if you'd like. If you'd like.
it's that kind of like layer above that closes the muscle almost, or like sits over the muscle.
So the sheath of the muscle. So think of it as almost like, it's like if you took an egg and you took a balloon and somehow put the egg in the balloon, the egg is the muscle and the balloon is the fascia.
I think when you started acknowledging the fascia, not that long ago, right? Like the 80s or something?
I don't know. That's before my time. And I started yoga like in the early 80s, but I was very young.
Were you even talking about fascia then?
The fascia thing became a bigger thing, like, it seems like it became talked about in the 90s more. Yeah, the fascia.
So every muscle is surrounded by.
Muscle is surrounded generally by fascia, and then that's also what allows, muscles glide over each other, right? They glide. So like if let's say this bicep had no fascia and it wasn't able to move, it would be stuck when I would move it, right? But you can see that the muscle,
So it's like a thin skin.
it's moved. Yeah, it's like almost think of like a rubber band. Not a rubber band. Imagine a balloon with an egg inside, or like I hate to say it, but this is what comes to mind. It's a better description. A condom with a hot dog. Yes, I just said that. With a hot dog, right? And then the a veggie dog. It's fine. A veggie dog. Imagine that you took that and then you tied it around the front of the tibia and the hip area, and that's like how like a muscle structures. Imagine if you had a bunch of those, how they could actually become pulley systems and glide over each other, right? So that's a good. The reason I say that's a better, because it's a soft, sinewy, gliding, translucent thing, like a condom actually, closer to a condom.
Like, when you
Sorry, I'm just. I know that's not.
Yeah, and you've got
Yeah.
like that layer between the skin and
Yeah.
the fascia.
Yes.
The way it was described to me was webbing, kind of.
A lot of people do, yes, because there is a webbing. There's a webbing element, but the actual fascia, yes, it does, because it also kind of starts connecting to each other. When people don't move a lot, the fascia starts like binding. When you do a lot of yoga, it actually helps prevent that heavy binding of the webbing that is connective tissue to the fascia as well. Because they don't all stay separated all the time. As you don't stretch and stop moving, they actually start webbing together. which is more a symptom of not moving, if that makes
I like
sense.
the description better.
But yeah, it's more visual, the condom
Yeah.
description, see? It works. It works. Okay, good, good. I'm glad you like it better. Because it is, in my opinion, it's the right way to describe it. But it's a little bit, sexual or whatever, which could upset some people, but it is what it is. Okay, so that's fascia. So fascia, so if you took that image, forget it now, right? Because it's I try to teach memorable things as much as I can. You'll never forget a veggie hot dog in a condom. Probably ever. Especially tied to a hip and a knee. What?
If you write that like that in a test.
I know, right?
You could. It would be the correct answer.
Veggie hot dog.
See, I got all kinds of visualizations, not just chakras. Okay, so but that is like the perfect description. Okay, so there's also, type this in, the fuzz speech. There's a guy on YouTube, I forget his name right now, but if you type in fascia, F-A-S-C-I-A, the fuzz speech, and it explains how when you sleep, the fascia starts growing these little webs, kind of like spider webs. And if you go about your day and you sit and you order everything on Amazon, and you have the book read to you, and you order pizza in, and then you go to sleep again. And then you do the same thing again, rinse and repeat. Eventually that fascia starts growing little, like when you sleep, they kind of web together. And they start actually like binding to each other. And eventually they start off looking like sinewy web. But as they keep growing, they become more thicker and thicker. And then that's why all of a sudden, you can no longer straighten your leg. Partially.
It's called fascia fuzz.
The fuzz speech. The
Gil
fuzz
Henley?
speech.
Is that his name?
Yes. Oh, you found him?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gil Henley.
Headley.
Headley. Yes, that's him.
H-E-D-L-E-Y.
He's an anatomist. Now, if you're squeamish about bodies, he does start showing you human cadavers. So he does. So just be forewarned. You could also, you know what though? You could flip it upside down and just listen. So that would be a good side study, since you don't have enough books to study. All right. So universal principles of alignment are based on the structure of the joints and how they are predominantly designed to move. Right? So the universe decided that our knee is supposed to predominantly hinge. If you start stretching the anterior cruciate ligaments and the collateral ligaments of the knee, and you try to make the knee move sideways, not front and back, you're going to start destabilizing the joint. Perfect example, guy with a tight hip comes into class, tell him to do pigeon. How many of you guys love pigeon pose? No? I love pigeon pose, personally. I love it. But the pose I teach in the set is figure 4, to stretch the same muscle. Why? Because it's harder to do damage to the knee. The hip can take it, but the knee, that's why it's safer. Why? Because when the hip is really tight, the IT band attaches to the glute and also comes back. It's called the iliotibial band. The iliotibial band, right? So ilium, tibia, right? So like this area here, the bones. It's an easy way to remember that. When you stretch, if your leg is way up here and you're stretching sideways, you're just stretching the collateral ligaments of the knee because the hip is bound. If I'm stretching and I'm down like this, where my hip is all the way down on the ground, then I'm not going to twist my knee joint sideways because my hip is totally supporting my femurs flat on the ground. Does it make sense? So it's not going to get that sideways rotate or lateral instability of the knee.
So coming at it from
Or
above.
front or back. Well, look, if you take your knee, like coming from above and forcing when the knee's off the ground, that's not good.
Not good. But if I start like
With the hip down, yes, then you can stretch. Protect the knee, exactly.
okay.
Okay? So if you take your knee, for instance, and hold your leg up like this and pull side to side, it shouldn't be going like it should be moving side to side, right? If you put your foot down, rest the muscle structure and push on your knee, push on it this way without resisting, the knee is not supposed to move a lot. Matter of fact, the way that's called the drawer test. When a doctor's checking whether you've torn the ligaments of your knee, they have you sit on a bench, you hang your leg over the edge, and he pulls on it. And if it goes back and forth, if it's all loose, he's like, all right, MRI, let's check this out. I might have to operate on this. And then he's going to decide based on it. Okay? So universal principles of alignment are based on anatomy and the joints, versus a lineage alignment is based on so-and-so said, whatever, lock the knee, or whatever it is. Old school ways, like, this is called Baddha Konasana, right? Do you know what that means? It means in English, it's like bound angle pose. Okay? Because they used to you're around here and here, and then stand on your legs and push down to get you in the pose, and push on your back. Yeah, they would push to get you really flexible. Because it was based on like certain martial arts moves, you wouldn't be able to kick high enough if you couldn't do full open bound hip pose, because you don't have the flexibility. It's based in performance. So even as somebody who I am flexible in this particular way, but it's not because I tied my hips into place and pushed down. Okay? It's based on really the structure of my legs. They're built open, but they're not built front to go forward and back. Just how they are. It's the shape of the joint, the tightness of the muscle, the history of cycling too. That's another factor. Bicycling a lot. I grew up cycling and skateboarding. It also tightens the hamstrings. So those are all factors. So when an alignment is based on the structure of the joints, so poses when they are not based on universal principles of alignment, it's usually pretty obvious. Okay? It's usually obvious. Meaning the knee is all bent sideways and the leg is behind the head and the arm is dislocated and pointing this way but behind their head. Have you guys ever seen that? It's called bone breaking, that dance, where they like lock and you go like makes your skin curl. That oftentimes is going against universal principles of alignment. So I don't recommend that.
Kind of on that, I had a hard time trying to figure out the improper poses and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Was that taught? Was that somewhere in the book?
Improper poses? What do you mean?
Was there something specific that I was supposed to do or look at for homework to figure out? Well, the homework said something about figure out improper poses. Right.
Oh,
Something like that there.
right. 3 poses that would go against like universal principles or are highly likely to cause injury.
Right.
So for that particular subject is anything that's trying to make a hinge joint spiral, anything that's trying to make for instance, like the hand too far back beyond their natural range of movement, which is about 90 degrees, right? Anything that goes against universal principles of movement for that particular joint.
So I would just like make up some stuff.
Yeah, you have to choose to study the poses that don't make sense to the best of your ability. Okay? Because not all yoga poses are anatomically correct. Remember, there's a history of something called fakirism. F-A-K-I-R. Fakir. Do you guys know what that is? Have you heard that term? So a fakir, they often were in Spain. I've seen there's a tradition of it in Spain and in India. They do these like crazy things with their bodies. They're often the guys like shoving spikes down their nose all the way in with a nail, tap, 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 tap. Or jumping on glass.
Are the Cirque du Soleil guys kind of...
Or dislocating the shoulder and popping it behind their, like that. They often like make faces and stuff. So that's fakirism. Some branches of yoga in the same way that in my opinion, it didn't come from one source. It came from a bunch of sources because we're a vast group of people that do yoga. And people were inventing yoga around the same time, but it branched off into yoga for martial arts, and yoga just like it is now, and yoga for sex, and yoga for cooking, and yoga for showmanship, and contortionism, and literally circus stuff.
So contortionism is always against the principles of alignment.
Maybe not all of them, but a lot of the poses are too extreme for most people to do healthfully, in my opinion. Most of them are too extreme. But not all of them actually dislocate the shoulder and pop the arm behind the back. Some of them do though. I mean, when it gets a little too freaky, you go, the body's really not built to do that. So it is beyond the norm. And it's an art form, so I don't want to because it's an art form, it's an art form. Is it healthy for most people to do that kind of contortionism? Probably not.
So Steve, what would you call, for example, spider? When you reach back and you drop all the way down. A lot of classes teach that, but I don't know that that's good for most people, yeah.
I don't think it is. I think it's too extreme for the back.
Like you drop back.
Lower back.
Yeah.
Too extreme for lower back.
It's a deep back bend.
Really, some people could do it and they would be okay.
Gymnastics.
Yeah. Some people can do it.
Regular yoga class.
If I did it,
I've never
if
done
I
it.
did it, I would hurt my wrist.
Extremely.
I'd hurt my wrist and I'd hurt my back. Some people can do it. She can do it though.
Yeah.
I saw her doing
But your
it, right?
ballet and stuff, I think, has helped you with probably make you more a little bit.
So what would a universal principle alignment be based upon? What would you? Based on the structure of the body joint, whatever joint it is. And it's also widely accepted alignment, typically. It's a higher acceptance amongst kinesiologists and anatomists.
So you're saying lineage is really not the way to go?
Not always, not always. Some are getting better. They're getting better. They're getting better. But a lot of lineage stuff I've seen taught is not necessarily somebody who really knows the body would look at it and say, especially if done incorrectly. Okay? So 3 commonly incorrect poses. They're all really extreme. The ones that are just, even the extreme levels of Garudasana can sometimes get too bendy. I think, in that particular one, it is pretty safe. But for someone like me, that was fine.
Yeah,
I think it's the legs.
Possible for me.
It's the legs. And for men, when the leg binds too far back, it starts to twist the knee sideways.
Yeah, how the shit does.
But you get the cue to push the knee towards.
It can hurt some knees. One of the most common injuries amongst, again, I know this is controversial, but one of the most common injuries amongst the Hot 26 is knees. Knees. Just the joint that gets injured, toe stand, yeah. Because the knee. The medial meniscus. Oftentimes it's the medial meniscus and the collateral ligaments that get
Pressure
damaged.
going down on one leg is what you're saying?
And even Garudasana, both. But not Garudasana as much. The one leg toe stand, Ekapada Baddha Konasana. That's what it's called. One foot out lotus posture. Yeah, when you're low and the leg is on top.
You had it like this.
I can do it though, just for the record. I can do that pose and not hurt my hip.
Right.
But for the general population. Remember, there is an exception to all the rules. There's one body type that can do it. I'll bet you could do a lot of those poses without injury, especially too being a ballerina.
Yeah, I think that.
But you take a guy like Sean or me, for that matter, I have to be very careful in Garudasana because of my body type, because my legs are bowed. My legs arc out. So when I try to hook the foot, I actually get a lot of lateral pressure in my knee and my ankle.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Can't do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Without breaking my leg.
Did you say lotus then for some people too?
For tight hips, lotus can be.
Yeah.
brutal for a lot of people's knees.
So my hips are really open, and I can't do lotus out.
That's gluteal, usually, gluteal muscle.
Because
It's
that's
the preventing of, it's the rotation of the femur.
this thing, right?
But again, again, like, not for everybody, again, every single person, that's why I'm afraid to like live stream these, because I'll always get people being like, that's wrong. You're saying that I've been doing so-and-so yoga for years and years, and I've never had one knee issue, ever. And I'm like, that's fine, but if you talk to a lot of people, there's a lot of people that did. Okay, so it's kind of like religion, there's always someone that it's perfect for, and there's always some people that it's not right for. You know what I mean? It's just how it is. I have friends that are total atheists. They will never be into religion or God or spirituality ever, and it's just not right for them. And that's that. And same with poses. Okay, so postures are like religion. Okay. Right? They're not for everybody. It's for some people, for most people, and if you do the wrong pose and you know it's not for you, it's not for you. Right? Just you'll know. When you try, like I've been doing forward, backward splits for 35 years, I'm still 8 inches off the ground. It's not for my body. Okay? Just not. It's just. Plus, there are other things to focus on that are more important for me. Okay? But that one doesn't necessarily break the universal principles of alignment. The universal principle of alignment is, what is the structure that you're working with, and is it built to move in that particular direction? And if the answer is no, then it goes against the universal principles of alignment. The body's joints are designed to move within a specific range for the specific joint, whatever it might be. Okay? That's what we talk about. So when you teach, base it on structure, mainly bones, and the type of joint that you're working with, and you'll be safe. If you base it on lineage, it depends on the education and emotional intelligence of the teacher to adapt to the sciences that show that the posture is correct or is not correct. You know? Or
Cobra in the 26. Like
that one, I know, for some people it's okay. That one's not totally. If the legs are all the way over, it gets really extreme. Like, people can kick all the way up over into like scorpion legs. Yeah. Like, I have students that can do that. But again, it's very, very extreme.
I want to be able to do that.
I know, a lot of people do.
I want to be able to do that. Like, hey, when you said it the other day, like the client who wanted to be a contortionist or whatever, and she said she wanted to do the arm stand with the
Legs
like,
open.
shit, I want to do that.
I want to do that, right. And then it becomes whether
I'm
it's,
not 50.
does the benefit outweigh the detriment? That's the question. And just because I say, and I'll say it as well, just because I say that it's not necessarily healthy doesn't mean it's not healthy for you. It may go against the universal principles of alignment. For instance, smoking is bad for you. But there are people that swear by smoking weed. And they say, no, it's medicine. It's a medicine. Right? But smoking is smoking. Right? I'm not pointing anyone out. I'm just saying that in general. Huh? See? And then people find a way around it. There's an edible, right? Which is true. True, eat the edibles. Right. Okay. Exactly. That's right. And again, like poses sometimes that are anatomically questionable, like Ekapada. I've shown you. I've done it cold. I'm pretty cold right now, but I could do Ekapada Baddha Konasana. That's a tiptoe posture, toe stand. Yeah. So I'm not saying I'm not being like a stiff, I'm not being like a stiff oldie here. I'm saying doesn't mean you don't do it. It means you may not teach it to everybody. Okay? You might teach that in select higher level classes.
But that's a major part of the 26.
I know it is. It is. It is. It's also been one of its biggest it's been one of its biggest challenges amongst the anatomist community and alignment
Are you
specialists.
saying people who are not able to do it, they're not gonna be able to do it, period? Or if you take it slowly and over
If you do it over a long, long period of time, you could do that pose safely. But if your gluteal muscle is tight and and your fascia is all bound up, you may not have the ability to rotate the femur. What is specific to that pose is if the femur cannot rotate sufficiently, you're going to have trouble with the knee. It's going to cause lateral pressure of the knee and pinch the medial meniscus. That's the specific injury. Right? That's the challenge. That's it, toe stand. You can do it. Yeah, like a lot of women can do it too. Women's hips, women ability and rotation of the hip in general. Yeah, a lot. It's hard on the knee. It's hard on the knee. Yeah.
Like snowboarding is hard and too, and people can do it for years and years.
Actually, skiing's harder on the knee.
Really?
They're finding, yes. Because it's one twisting lever on one knee. When the snowboard is tethered to both legs, they're finding it's safer than the knee, which causes literal spiral breaks to the knee. When the bindings don't come out, you spiral break the knee. You don't get spiral breaks so much with snowboarding. You do get some impingement to the meniscus, but not as much. You don't get spiral breaks. That's why snowboarding is actually safer than skiing. Yeah.
Not for the tailbone.
Almost killed me.
Did you?
Yeah, so I messed up my back. Scorpion myself. I was like,
Right. Yeah. You could really.
fell forward.
Yeah.
The board still attached.
Scary.
Yeah.
All right. So Sanskrit aphorisms. I think we can go and actually. Why don't we practice a little bit? Or actually, let's do 20 minutes of practice. So 10 and 10, and then we'll continue up at Bronson Caves. So we'll leave. That way we'll leave by 2. Okay. Let's do that. Any questions on the topic so far? I know we kind of drilled these. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
But from when I read in the book about the sun's location, like the more experienced one, I don't really understand it. So people they jump from here, like with the straight legs.
Mm-hmm.
How was that? Do you know that or not? Like I don't know. It was written.
For
like,
which movement?
From downward facing dog back to your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Like because they kind of explained it complicated. So people are like jumping.
With their legs totally straight.
Like up. Like
They lift their hips way up, almost like a handstand. And then they slowly lower down. They call it floating up. You probably could do that, but it's going to take some time. Huh?
I almost broke my nose today.
Did you?
I felt my face.
Be careful, yeah. So what you're doing is you're almost doing handstand, like you're jumping up so far that you're like here, and you're jumping up and you're kind of, you know what I mean? You're like floating from a handstand
Do
into
they
it.
like stretch their legs up? Or
Yeah,
They're
you
like,
pick them up.
they're lifting their hips up.
just
Yeah.
just
It's like their hips are way up. Some of them are almost doing a half handstand and then lowering down slow. The way to do that is you kip your knees. The way to practice that is you kind of do this. Like you're here, and you kind of like, that's the drill. Like that. Can you do that? Yeah. Kind of, and then you float down. But you're jumping up. The way to do it though is what I was just showing you. Like bring it down dog, jump, touch your knees to your shoulder, to your elbows, and jump back. And back, and back. Yes, that's the drill. Yeah. And then back. That's the muscle strength you'll need. And then the flexibility.
Bring your feet up.
No, knees only. And then I can't do that so much anymore. I used to be able to do it in my 20s. I know what you're talking about. We call it floating to hands. But you kip your knees and then back. Kip and back, kip and back. And then you slowly lower down to the hands. So eventually what you do is you'll be here. And as you jump up, if you're able to down like you do in handstand. There are people that can jump up touch their foot to their wrist, and then jump back to down dog. Like they have that much control. I think I used to be able to do it. I can't do it anymore. I don't do it. I'm in my almost 50. Can you do
I
it?
don't know what you mean.
Yeah.
So you gotta jump, you literally jump forward, touch your toe to your
While
wrist.
all your weight is in your hands?
Yes, and then you jump back to down
So your
dog.
feet never really plant.
There, you float. You float. That's extreme. Kind of like that, yes, where you just tap it. You
Let
just-
your feet.
You touch the tip of your toe to your wrist, coming back, yes. It's extremely hard. I think you have to hold your breath. Yeah,
That's some real strength there.
it's extreme strength. There is a girl who can do it, Alyona Shilova. She can do it. She's a student, she's a Facebook with me, she's a friend of mine. A Facebook friend of mine. All right, I'm gonna pause this.